Hello everybody and welcome back to Microsoft Flight Simulator, and in this video I'm going to be going over the basics of Pilot2ATC, how to get it configured up and running for you as quickly as possible, breaking down the bit that I know about it. Now there's still a ton of features within it that I haven't messed around with very much, but I am going to show you what I actually know and how to at least get it up and running comfortably, and some tips and tricks that you can do to make it run even more efficiently for you. Alright, so without further delay, let's get into the video. So obviously the first step that you're going to need to do is to actually go to the Pilot2ATC.com website and purchase the app. Well, back up there. You don't actually have to purchase it for the first time. The cool thing about Pilot2ATC, and it's pretty rare for this particular feature, is that you get a full 10 days of the full product to play around with it and decide if it's something that you want to use. This is really rare for software. Most softwares do give you some sort of trial version, but they tend to be feature limited, right? They put a cap on what you can actually do with it. It's sort of like a teaser version, where here what this gentleman has done is actually giving you full access to everything that Pilot2ATC can do for 10 days without purchasing. This is a really awesome feature. It's really rare in software development, so kudos just for that. It's a very kind thing to do, if you will, given the way most software works today. It is $59.95 US dollars. Now, this is something that is pricey, but it is something that is a very, very awesome tool with inside of flight simulation, because it also works, I believe, for P3D and X-Plane 11. I know X-Plane 11. I haven't used P3D in so long, which is a shame because I have the PMDG products, but I'm just too much of a graphics snob to go back. Anyway, let me first break down a little bit about Pilot2ATC. Pilot2ATC is not 100% accurate in the phraseology and in the procedural aspect of it, and the things that you will say. I would say that the biggest benefits to Pilot2ATC, especially in conjunction with like ATC Chatter, which we'll talk about later on, it definitely increases the immersion a lot, okay? Gets you more involved in the flight simulation, gets you more involved in some of the procedural tasks that you have to do while flying the plane, getting that communication channel opened up. And I think that's where it really shines, is it gets you used to having to talk to ATC while flying the aircraft and following commands and making sure you don't bust your altitudes or, airspace restrictions and things like that. Like I said, it's not perfect, but it's a really good training aid. It's a very nice place to start. Again, and the biggest thing that I think is the advantage of it is like I said, getting used to speaking to ATC. The phraseology isn't perfect, but it's pretty close. I remember, when my father had his pilot's license, listening to some of the phraseology and really paying close attention to it. And I was fairly young back then, but I remember a lot of the same verbiage would come up, right? So I would say that's its biggest strength, is just getting you in that habit of talking to air traffic control, and then relaying the commands and making sure to use things like your call signs when you should and whatnot. Because the nice thing about Pilot2ATC, it'll yell at you if you don't use your call sign. It won't accept any command you give if you do not end it with your call sign. So that's kind of neat. Now, it is a very robust software. It does a whole lot more than just talking to ATC, and we'll get into some of that here in a few minutes. So the first thing that you're obviously going to want to do is to download the software. Once you get the software, you'll come to the page here, and you'll either grab your whichever Navigraph cycle that you want. This, I believe, is the latest one. This is the full version. If you already own it, by the way, make sure you come back here periodically and check for the latest update. Okay, now make sure you read this page very clearly, okay, because I mean he even says right here, the learning curve is significant, please read the manual. Okay, so and it really is, the manuals are great. So to show you guys the manuals, here's the documentation that comes with it. Okay, it comes with a bunch. Now we're not going to go through all of these today, but I want you to know that the grammar starter phrases and the grammar phrases is a really handy PDF, because they actually walk you through the things that you should say, things that you should be expected to hear. It's really handy. And then the feature, functions, operations. I mean, it's a lot of reading. And the purpose of this video is if you're like me and you tend to not listen to people when it says things like this, you know, I am absolutely guilty of this. I like to just jump in and go. So let's keep moving on. So you're going to need Pilot2ATC, obviously, but you're also going to need this here, which is FSUI PC7. Now there is a free version, I believe, that will allow you to get Pilot2ATC up and running, and we'll talk about some things that, you know, little signs that you can catch later on that lets you know when this isn't running. I do, however, recommend coming here and purchasing it. Now, yes, we're talking $60 here, and we're talking about what, $20 here for US dollars, give or take. And so now we're into this for $70, right? Well, now you're like, Mike, is this really worth $70? That's a lot of money, and I absolutely agree with you. It is a lot of money. But I'm still going to say yes, it is. Now, my opinion of this price changed very recently. This software does a whole lot more than I thought it did, and it's because I never had to reach out to it to do the things that I wanted to do. But this is the part that actually I found myself using the other day. What you can do is, much like, I mean, for those of you who have seen it in my previous videos with a software that I use called RS Mapper, which RS Mapper just allows you to emulate key bindings, keyboard strokes with your HOTAS button. So when I push a button on my HOTAS, it's actually sending Control K to the computer, right? This does something so much more efficient for Microsoft Flight Simulator. And you would basically come up here, you select the button that you want to map, so you press the button on your joystick. Okay, it tells you what joystick you actually depressed here, what button you pressed. Then here you can select from a huge list of functions. Actually here, I think I have it running. I can show you guys real quick. This isn't a FSUI PC7 tutorial here, but I want to show you guys what I'm talking about because it is required. So we would come here, you know, I don't have anything plugged in. Okay, cool, that did work. And then you select FS control, and look at this. These are all of the current controls within the SDK for Microsoft Flight Simulator. Everything from ELT on, there's your engine auto starts. I mean, everything. Fuel selection, glare shield controls, virtually everything. So you can fine-tune your controls so much more using this software. There's your yaw damper on and off. You can select one control to do multiple things. Like one button for me turns the yaw damper on and the autopilot on in the TBM 930. So it just really, really handy. Now I don't want to get too far into this, but what happened there? Oh, okay, I see what happened. Yeah, we're good. We're good. Okay. But I'm just trying to state out here that at this point, I do recommend purchasing this versus doing the trial version, but I'll leave that, guys, obviously up to you. It's just a recommendation. Because if you're like me, and especially for those of you who are like interested in building your own controls, you know, you're handy with electronics and you've made your own control pads before, you know, things, you have 3D printers and whatnot. This is going to be a very handy software for you to have for mapping those controls later on. Okay, so that's enough with FSUI PC7, but you're going to need Pilot2ATC and a version of FSUI PC7 that is critical for Microsoft Flight Simulator in order for this to work. Okay, so now let's get into configuring Pilot2ATC. Okay, so after you have configured or installed Pilot2ATC, which the installation process is pretty self-explanatory, you'll get a CD key or a license key CD key. There's a blast from the past. A license key emailed to you. Now, it does stay on that purchase page. It can take him a little bit. He's the one who sends them out, sort of like I do with my documents. So, you know, if he's sleeping throughout the night, you know, it's in the middle of the hours of the U.S. time frame, you know, he's probably sleeping. So, you know, be patient if you don't get it right away. I think I got it, you know, I purchased it late at night one night, and I had it by the next morning. So he's on it. He's definitely on it. So you run through the installation, you pick the installation directory, you know, wherever you want it installed. That part's pretty black and white, which is why I didn't demonstrate, just like installing anything else. And the same thing with FSUIPC7. You want to make sure it's installed. Now, FSUIPC7, you can have it auto start when Microsoft Flight Simulator starts, which is what I do. But you always want to make sure that you launch the Flight Simulator, then launch FSUIPC7, then launch your Pilot2ATC for the smoothest way. Now, if you ever get in here and you go to connect, okay, and we'll get to what all this does here in a second, but I just want to show you this right away, and it doesn't do anything. You'll see simulator connected, but nothing happens here. You don't see your call sign, you don't see your aircraft pop up. Chances are FSUIPC7 isn't running. Now at that point, literally just hit the connect button again so it disconnects. Start FSUIPC7, hit the connect again, and you're good to go. You don't have to close everything down, start all over. Just get FSUIPC7 running and you'll be fine. Okay, all right. So this is the primary page. Now ignore all of this down here for a minute because we're going to get into that in a minute. All right. So the first thing that you're going to want to do, obviously you launch your simulator, you get into your aircraft. All right. So now at this point, we're going to go through the config menu first. Sorry for the weird cutout there, but it dawned on me that I had all of my license information displayed for you guys, and I'm just not that nice of a guy. Anyway, so what we're going to do is we're going to work from the left side over to the right, going over the parts that I feel are the most critical here for getting you started. Okay, this is not everything. Again, I'm not an expert. I'm just trying to help you guys out here. All right, so Pilot2ATC settings, ignore avionics switch, ignore battery switch. I use these, and what this means is that the radio will function even if the battery and avionics switches are off inside the aircraft itself. The one that I find is more critical, I don't know what this weird tweaking the screen is doing, guys, so bear with me on that. I apologize. It just started. The ignore avionics switch is the one that I typically do versus ignore battery switch. And the reason why is, like, for example, aircraft like the A320, and actually, sorry, what I want is that and that. I don't want it to ignore the battery switch. I do want it to ignore the avionics switch, and it's because, like, aircraft like the A320, I'll have the batteries turned on, external power turned on, and this still won't come alive. So I'm not sure what it's registering in the aspect of the A320 as the avionics switch. The only thing I can think of is maybe the APU, but I don't know. Anyway, so that's just why I do that. But if you want both those on, that means you'll be able to use the radio with the aircraft completely cold and dark still. Now, some advantages to this and why, for example, that I do this sometimes is, let's say you want to get the ATIS information before you create your flight plan, you know, like in SimBrief. That way you can set up the correct departure runways and things like that. And I'll explain the pros and cons to that here in a minute. That's the way I do it, and there's a very specific reason for it, which we'll talk about in just a second. So just bear with me on that. We'll come back around to that. And then I want you guys to sort of, you know, just sort of peruse through these so you guys can see what some of the features that it has. Pause when sim is paused. Obviously, I want that. Disable the program exit warning. Are you sure you want to close this program? You know, that's what that is. Grammar help. You know, it's got some assistance there. Show AT assignments. We'll talk about that, or we'll demonstrate that later. Use decimal instead of point. So, for example, if you are on the European continent, you know, where they'll say, you know, comm frequencies at 30.2 or whatever, you know, or giving you your altimeter. So if you want to say that, aircraft call sign. Okay, so here we can see that I have airline here selected. We have an airliner behind us. I come over here, put in the aircraft airline code. You can see it popped up with Delta Airlines. And then it will automatically populate Delta as the call sign. You put in your flight number, and if you want to, you can append it with the heavy. So if you're flying a larger aircraft that would need the heavy call sign. I'm trying to think of one that we would have that would need that. I don't think the A321 qualifies. Maybe the A330, I'm not sure. But like, for example, the A380, for simulation purposes, you would probably use it when it comes out. But truth be told, hopefully he updates this a little bit, because the A380 would be considered a super. Anyway, moving on down, set up some basic aircraft information, max crosswind ability, max tailwind ability. You would take these from your pilot operator's handbook. Basically, the max crosswind, the aircraft is registered as safe to fly in or certified to fly in. I don't worry about the terps yet. Haven't dealt with anything about them yet. COM radio swap tone, if you want it to play a tone when you swap the channels, from standby to the active here. Okay, it'll play a tone, go doot, and you can select the tone. You can pick whatever you want. And then obviously you have all of your license information, but you want to make sure check this if you're ever doing like I'm doing and putting this on screen, which is why we had the weird cut off there in the video. All right, so let's move on over to the ATC settings here. Let's see here, allowed altitude variance. So these are going to be the restrictions at which it yells at you. Okay, minimum vertical speed. I'm actually just going to let you guys cruise through these, but what this section is, this is all about if you breach these numbers. Okay, so for example, allowed altitude variance. All right, if they say Delta 1531 flight or set your flight level, climb and maintain flight level 230. Okay, and I'm at 23,700 feet. They're gonna, or 22,700 feet. They're going to yell at me. They're going to come out and say, Delta 1531, climb and maintain 23,000. You're too low, kind of thing. Okay, and so that's what these all are. Same thing with the variance heading, course deviation 1.5 degrees or 1.5 nautical miles. So that's going to be your flight path. All right, if you are left or right of the flight path you are assigned to fly by more than 1.5 miles, they're going to come up and say, hey, adjust your headings to resume navigation. Okay, so that's what that's all about. Let's see here, altitude warning. This is how frequently they are going to yell at you for your altitude. If you don't respond, and by respond, I mean if you do not correct it, within the allotted time here, they will, they'll come out and say it again. Now, here's the catch with this. If you ignore it for too long, what will happen is this Pilot2ATC will cancel your IFR flight plan, and you'll be moving to VOR or VFR. Controller radius. So this is I don't know what these measurements are. I don't know if these are 5 nautical miles. I'm assuming so, just based on approach 35 nautical miles, 15, and 5 nautical miles. But you can change that. So that's kind of cool. Controller name radius. I'm not sure what that one is. Honestly, I don't know what that one does, but I have to go back and look. But again, the documentation is here. Okay. Oh, it's always on top. The documentation is right here. Features, functions, all that. So it has all this in it. Anything that I've missed, you can go through that PDF and find. Your VFR squawk code, so you can change this. I know, I believe in Europe it's something different. 7,000, is that right? Don't quote me on that. I think it's 7,000. Pilot2ATC provides the ATIS information. You would uncheck this if you want to get your ATIS directly from Microsoft Flight Simulator or another source. But I prefer to get it straight from here. Again, it enhances that immersion and that habitual nature of tuning the frequencies and getting your information as you need to. Okay, and then units type US, and you would set this to wherever you need, wherever your zone of operation is. Okay? All right, so now let's move on over to sounds for a second. ATC chatter. Now, I'm not going to go into how to set this up yet because I just started messing with this. Okay, so there is information in the documentation on how to do this, but I just got it working like a few days ago, so I'm not ready to, I don't feel confident enough to tell you guys how to do this over video yet. Okay, I want to play with a few more things, but let's talk about what ATC chatter is. Oh, there it is. ATC chatter. Here we go. Let me move this off screen for a minute. Okay. So here is ATC chatter, and all it is background noise. I actually think I can play you guys an example of it. Give me just a second. I'll be happy to do that. If I can remember where I put it. There's Pilot2ATC. Oh, it'll be in there actually. Sounds, ATC chatter, controls. All right, so here. Why did it open Audition? Really? All right, that's fine. But here we go.
584, reduce speed to 210.
210 speed, yeah, 584.
Okay. That is a very short clip, but it's just tons of background real-world radio traffic that has been modified slightly. Most of them have the locations taken out of it. That way, you know, and the purpose of that is that way you're not flying into, like, you know, my instance, you know, I fly into Tucson a lot. Obviously, it's where I'm from. And you're not flying into Tucson hearing like JFK traffic. You know what I mean? So that's why they've taken most of the locations out of it. There are some that still slip through there. But anyway, it's really cool because, again, it increases that immersion in the background as you're flying along. You're not just flying along in dead air. You can actually, you know, hear other traffic on the radio, which is really awesome. Okay, so but you can break it down into single files, country folders, and airport folders or controller folders. I've messed around with controller folders, and what that means is that it's not going to break it down into where I'm at. It's going to break it down into which controller should be talking at this particular time, and just gives me a variation. If I were to fine-tune that, for example, to airport folders, I'd probably have better success in not hearing things that I shouldn't be at my location. But it's really awesome to have in the background. I also recommend this one. I know that's another $15. I'm just throwing the money away, aren't I? But I recommend this one too, because a neat tool that I've been doing with it is, as I hear ATC talking, I'm emulating in my mind that I'm the pilot that they're talking to. You got to remember how fast ATC, air traffic control, talks. Okay, that they talk very quickly, and that's actually one of my more difficult things to process at this time in my learning stage of becoming a pilot, is hearing what they're saying the first time around. You know, because sometimes they talk so fast, and you've got the squelch on top of it. You know or the static, excuse me. You know, it makes it a little difficult for me to pick up what they're saying sometimes. So it's a really cool habit if you're flying around and you're using the ATC chatter to try to act as if they're talking to you, and then repeat those commands very quickly back. You know, anyway, just a neat little tool. It's not just background noise if you take it as a learning tool as well. Anyway, voices, there are a bunch of custom voices, but these are the voices that you're going to hear. So now this is not a part of the ATC chatter. This is when Pilot2ATC is talking to you. Okay, so you have your different frequencies, you know, ATC centers, your approaches, and then you can choose. Now, right now, I've only got the defaults installed, but you can choose the speed at which it's talking, the volume, and the cool part about this is the neat part about messing with the speed is, you can make it sound a bit more realistic, like it's a real human talking, and then it also creates some variation in the way they talk. So again, creates a little bit more of that immersion by making it almost feel like you're talking to somebody different each time. Okay, so that's kind of cool. Speech recognition settings. These are your silence timeout settings. I haven't messed with those. Those are all default. I haven't had any issue mentioning those or playing with those. Your output device, where do you want the speech to come out of when they are talking to you? Copilot options. If you check responds to radio, that means every single time that Pilot2ATC talks, your quote-unquote AI copilot is going to respond back. So basically, you don't ever talk on the radio. Okay? I do like that it changes the frequencies for me. Now, this is a preference thing, and sometimes I turn this on, sometimes I turn it off. It depends what I feel like doing that particular day. If they say, you know, contact ground on, you know, 12665, and you have this checked, you will see that your radio frequency will change. Okay. And then I think you still have to select the standby though, or transfer it from standby to active. Let's see here. Respond to radio hotkey. Okay. So this is if you want the copilot to respond to Pilot2ATC only when you tell it to. So, for example, if I were to set a key in here and it brings up this little menu here, we could set a keyboard command, so like the space bar here, and if I set that, then every time, and we can hit enable, every time that I don't want to respond to ATC, and I'll give you guys an example of that later on. I could hit spacebar and the Copilot will do it for me. Okay, and there's a couple situations in which I don't like doing it, and I'll tell you why when we get to that point. Responds to radio button, again, joystick not set, so again, we can actually, I want to uncheck that, and I would probably more like set it on my flight controls. And so here, like right now, I don't have my alpha hooked up, but I've got my my thrustmaster. So if I wanted, let's do that button there, button 1, okay, and I hit save. And again, this is the same thing. So I'm flying around, right? Maybe we're getting ready to take off or whatever, and ATC gives me a command. Well, I'm not in a position to comfortably respond to them. You know, I'm still learning, whatever it may be. I can tap that button, this button 1 on my joystick, and the Copilot will respond. Okay, that way, you know, that communication isn't just left with dead air. All right, it's a nice tool if you don't rely on it too much. You know, if you're really wanting to learn and practice and become more familiar with, you know, managing the controls while talking to ATC, you know, this is a nice option to have available to you. And I'm also going to say this: don't be afraid to use these things. And my reason for saying that is that is that what enabled that? No? Okay, so I did check that. Anyway, don't be afraid to use these things, because remember, this isn't a real plane. And what I mean by that is normally you wouldn't have to take your hand off the controls, find your mouse, you know, make sure you mouse over the right section, use your mouse wheel to adjust it, dealing with the zoom nonsense, or, you know, I know the zoom can be disabled. My thing is, like, the zoom wheel actually does come in handy on my mouse, which is why I don't turn it off, especially when making videos. Anyway, you know, you do have some difficulties in flight simulation that you may not have in the real world. You know, in the real world, you reach down, you find the knob you need, you turn the thing, right? So don't be afraid to use these, you know, when you need to. And then speech recognized tone. This is if you want it to play a tone, giving you an audible acknowledgement that your speech was recognized, that it heard you, okay? And then speech assistant launches a child window. There is a speech assistant down here we'll talk about later, and so if you wanted it to launch as a separate window, you could check that. And actually, we'll go ahead and leave that on. Why not? All right, let's go to AI traffic. Airborne traffic alerts on. So this is if Pilot2ATC notifies you of AI traffic up in the air or other traffic near you. Again, these are going to be the limitations at which, you know, you have to make sure that you say, you know, traffic in sight, things like that. Some other alerts and settings. IPv4 address, this is if you have Pilot2ATC running on a separate machine. That's where that would be necessary. But I'm using it obviously as the same, and this is all for X-Plane 11 as well. So that's another piece that you want to pay attention to. Let's see here. I think we're getting close here. Flight plan. This is what I was talking about earlier. If you are like me and I like to create my own flight plan in SimBrief. And more or less it's to get me in the habit of reading it and creating them and seeing them in action. Okay. And you can see import, export, SID, start, and approach waypoints. Okay. If you create a flight plan, however, whether that's from Microsoft Flight Simulator or from SimBrief, okay, and you want it to take everything, okay, because what it will normally take is just your between route, right? So anything after the SID, anything before the star, okay, it will import, okay, the actual route into the new airspace. I want it to pick the SID, the star, the approach, and the waypoints, okay, So, and the reason why is because I want to make sure I'm using the most latest AIRAC data. Okay. Now the other catch to that is the reason why I do that is why I get my ATIS information before I create my flight plan. So it really depends on what you want to do. My process is when I do these videos and when I do my flight plans, and you guys have seen it in plenty of my videos for those of you who watch them, is I will get into the plane, get the power turned on, get my ATIS information, and then typically the next segment of my videos is creating the flight plan in SimBrief. Okay, once I have the ATIS information, I still want to take off on the live active runways. I still want to follow the flight routes that are currently in use, you know, and what I would actually get from ATC based on current weather conditions. Okay, but I want to be able to set that all up in SimBrief. That way I can see it and visualize it as I'm learning. Now, this is something that can be beneficial and a hindrance. We'll talk about that in a second too. But so these ATC options, I'm sure many of you guys have probably already been reading these. This removes this feature. Okay, if I uncheck this, ATC can assign the SID, the star, the approaches, what it feels is best, force a star assignment, and things like that. So you can have ATC ignore the published restrictions. Okay, ATC ignores below 10,000 feet speed limit, so which I don't like. Remember, below 10,000 feet, we need to be below 250 knots. Okay, so all of this stuff. So it's pretty black and white. There isn't a whole lot to these things. You can have it randomize things if you want. You know, if you don't want to be flying the same route, if you want to, you know, have your flight plan change, things like that. That could be kind of a neat way to do it. Okay, the rest of this stuff again is for P3D, X-Plane, FSX. I'm not going to go through that. Flight plan loader. You can actually select a flight plan location, but I just load them in one at a time, and I'll show you guys how I do that in a minute. And then your weather information, weather refresh interval, rather, you know, and then where does it get it from? If you are using Rex Weather, you can actually select Rex Weather. It will ask you what the root folder of it is. You can see I've got that programmed here. I do tend to set that up. That way we get that going. But that's only if I'm using Rex Weather on that flight. Otherwise, it may be dramatically different from what I'm actually experiencing in the simulator. Okay, so I'll leave that in NOAA for right now because I don't know what I'm going to be doing next time I use it. And then again, it refreshes the weather based on whatever interval distance you have set here. And then finally, buttons. Buttons are pretty black and white. You know, you have your push-to-talk button, push-to-talk hotkey. If you see joystick button, the difference joystick button, hotkey. Hotkey is going to be keyboard. Okay, joystick button, self-explanatory. So anytime you see hotkey, it's looking for a keyboard command. Okay, speech assistant, Windows hotkey. You can set up a couple of different ones here. Transponder mode, joystick button. I don't do that. I like to change it. Although, so what this is doing, and I'll tell you guys about this real quick, because actually, and same thing with the ATC chatter hotkey. If you want to turn ATC chatter on off, the transponder mode is up here. Okay, it doesn't detect what the transponder mode is actively in the aircraft. So for example, I'll show you guys what I'm talking about here. Let me bring that back up. And to close this window, you have to tap the config button. Now let's come in here and let's go to our A320. That's why I have this up and running here for a second. Where are you? There we go. All right, so let's just turn the transponder on. Okay, you can see that it's on now. But if we come over to Pilot2ATC, it still shows off. Okay, you actually have to come up here and change the transponder mode, which you are not doing. I'm wondering if I'm in the wrong spot. I thought that was where we did it from. Interesting. Oh, we're disconnected. That'll do it too. That'll do it too. That'll do, donkey. Okay, so now you can see, and it's still off. And now when we click it, standby, active, altimeter following, or altitude following, okay? So you have to do it in both. So it's really depending on how you want to do it. Now, so what they're saying is that joystick button, this one here, you can set a button on your joystick. I'll set one real quick so you guys can see it. And again, let's find this guy here. And let's just... why aren't you working? There we go. That'll work. Alright, so we can come here, close the configuration window. I don't know why it's not liking that all of a sudden. It didn't like that button the first time I pressed it, so give me a second. Let me go back. Where was that? Transponder mode, joystick. Let me pick a different button. Alright, let's use that. And did I enable it? I just thought about that too. Okay, joystick button, transponder. Okay, and it is enabled. So now, when we close this, it should... And it's not. That may be a bug, not sure. But it should be changing the transponder mode between the standby and, you know, the different modes that it has available to it. Okay, so that's a lot of information. I know it is. Let me see where we're at and if I need to break this into 2 videos, because we still have a ton of information to go over. So maybe I'll break this into step 2. Okay, so let me see where we're at. Alright guys, so this is already a 35-minute plus video here. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this one here. So be on the lookout for part 2 be coming right behind this one, where we go into how to use Pilot2ATC. Okay, so I hope you guys have enjoyed this so far. I hope you're finding it helpful, at least maybe helping you steer one direction or the other, whether or not, if you're on the fence on whether or not to purchase this, because I know it is expensive to get set up and running the way that I'm recommending. So anyway, let me know what you guys think down in the comments below, and I will see you guys in the next one where we actually demonstrate its functionality.